On this Father's Day 2025, I want to take a moment to talk about my father, Freddie Cook. Now, my father came up in the streets of Atlanta during the civil rights movement, and he grew up poor in some of the roughest parts of the city, raised by his mother as the middle child of three boys. His own father, who died while he was in college, was, to put it charitably, not a good person. And honestly, I've never heard a kind word said about the man. And if I'm being really honest, my father probably would have been better without him altogether. As a scholar with promise, he left high school after the 11th grade to attend Morehouse College. He and my mother, who was at Spelman at the time, fell in love and eloped. And not long after they graduated, my sister was born. And then I came along a couple of years later. Now, I share all of this because my father had no blueprint for fatherhood, no role model other than my mother's father, who he met in college. But he really wanted to be one. And he was determined to be the kind of father that he never had. Now, in the course of figuring out how to raise us, yeah, he made some mistakes and stumbled, but he never stopped trying and he never stopped loving us. And I was a deeply depressed child, no matter how good or bad things were. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for him trying to pull me out of the darkness while still wrestling with his own past. But he tried everything. He introduced me to Lao Tzu, Khalil Gibran, and Heinrich Heine, and in doing so, he helped shape the way I think. Another cool memory was around that time, he was watching a documentary on how the father of Pistol Pete Maravich subjected him to strict training. So at 8 years old, he had me out in the garage with the lights off, dribbling my basketball to sharpen my ball handling skills. And he coached me in basketball, and my team won a local championship in elementary school. Later, he was my Richard Williams before the world even knew the Williams sisters, training me hard in tennis, even getting me a coach. He was pushing me to be the next Yannick Noah. For those too young to have heard of him, look him up. It's definitely worth your time. But beyond all that, he talked to me constantly about the world, about how to be a man. He's the reason why I question everything. He's the source of my relentless curiosity and unrelenting skepticism. He taught me that accountability was everything. How did you get into that situation? He'd ask. And how did you respond after it happened? To him, even if something wasn't my fault, well, I still had a role to play. Unfortunately, I was slow to absorb those lessons of accountability, in part because I didn't understand my own depression, especially because it seemed to hit the hardest when life was going well. Now, to put it kindly, I wasn't a good student in school, even though I tested well. Report cards would come home, and my father would sit me down and tell me, sometimes with tears in his eyes, that Black people had died to give you these opportunities and you're wasting them. Sorry for my bad Freddie Cook imitation. Sorry about that. He didn't understand why I couldn't just get it. He tried everything to motivate me, but I wouldn't even do the bare minimum. When my little sister was born, I was about 12, and her love was one of the few things that lifted me during those dark times. But there were still some tough moments. Times when my father would yell or discipline me behind a closed door because I'd done something stupid. And she'd come running and yelling, "Don't you beat my brother." And of course, he couldn't keep going after that. But he wasn't finished. Now, flash to 11th grade. I was jumped and nearly beaten to death by a group of teens from a rival school. My dad stayed by my side in the hospital, and when I was released, he tried to track down the guys who did it. I remember that stretch of time because it brought us closer. Although at times we still clashed because I still refused to live up to my potential. When I left high school after 4 years, how is a story for another time. My parents invited an Army recruiter to the house and brought me in to talk to him. My father had always told me that when I turned 18, I wouldn't be living in his house unless I was in college or damn near dead. Now, that might sound cold, but if you knew the kind of kid I was, you'd probably understand. Everything changed around my third year in the Army. I was stationed in Germany, and my father flew my whole family out to visit me. When I met them at the airport, my father looked at me and said for the first time that he finally saw a man, and I'll never forget that. There are so many stories I could tell you about my father, but the truth is, it's hard to put into words the impact he's had on my life. For a man who had no example to follow, he became the anchor of my growth. His lessons still power me into my 50s, even during the hardest years when I was too young, too angry, or too ashamed to say it. I admired him. So when people say I'm overly curious or annoyingly skeptical, when they wonder why I question everything, now you know. That came from Freddie Cook. Happy Father's Day, Pop. Thank you for every hard talk, every long stare, every moment you walked away in frustration, but always returned to try again. I love you more than words can say.